All right. Are you one of the many parents who's stuck in a power struggle or unsure how to handle your kids' challenging behaviors? Hello and welcome. I'm Coach Jason from Adaptive Movement. I do youth personal training for kids of all abilities, and I'm joined here today with Jen Dreyer. Please introduce yourself, Jen, and tell us what you do.
Hi, my name is Jen Dreyer. I am co-founder, I'm a parent coach for parents of neurodivergent kids. I'm a co-founder of an organization called Raising Orchid Kids, which I co-run alongside speech therapist and parent coach Gabrielle Nicolay. And we run all kinds of supports for parents. So we provide all kinds of supports for parents of kids with or without diagnoses, um, who, just are atypical in some way, shape, or form. And we run practical strategies classes for parents, or 8-week online practical strategies classes. We have ongoing membership for people who have come through our classes. And we also have webinars that come up periodically on special topics. Like we have one actually coming up on December 7th that is on IEPs. And we have a guest coming to speak who's a psychologist. So often we'll have people come on who are experts in, sort of niche areas to help sort of flesh out some of the tricky parts, like IEP is very tricky.
Yeah,
So
excellent. Exactly. This
and
is why I
also,
think, go ahead.
yeah, I was just going to say the other thing too is that I am also a mom of
Mm.
an autistic and ADHD. I can write it out, AUDHD, but saying it sounds a little tricky. Son who's 11, and so that's kind of how I came to this work. I also have an older son who is 14 and is mild ADHD, more or less neurotypical. I joke that so our younger we call kids who have these sort of differences in the way they move through the world. We like to call them orchids because we like to reframe it in a positive way, because I think we end up often as parents in society, we focus a lot on the negatives, right? On the things that are different, on the things that are challenging. And I think that if we can think about these kinds of, these kids who come into the world a little, atypically, right? They move through the world in a different way than their typically developing peers. That they, like orchids, just need a little bit of extra support and extra circumstances and environment to really be beautiful and thrive, but they need those extra supports. And without those, it makes it much harder for them to do well. So I have
Right.
an orchid, and I joke my older son is like a tulip. He's not quite like the dandelion that is the really easy kid, but he's
Yeah,
in the middle, but he's gotten easier as he's gotten older. So anyway, so that's kind
exactly.
of the experience that I bring to it.
I love it. I love it. So you're coaching these parents, you're also one of the moms, so you've got the experience, you're able to speak from that point of view, and this is great. I think it'd be such a helpful resource for so many of the families out there, the parents of the kids who I'm working with, and like you said, they may or may not have a diagnosis, right? These strategies will help you across the board. Whether or not your kid has a diagnosis doesn't really matter. If you're facing these kinds of challenges, you're not sure what to do at home, you have to stay organized, help your kids get on track, So I think these kinds of strategies and tactics that you're giving to the parents, they're going to be really helpful. Even if your kid doesn't yet have a diagnosis, you can sort of get pointed in the right direction and feel more confident, like you're able to handle these issues as they come up.
Yeah, definitely. And a lot of times the parents that we've been doing this since March 2020. Actually, we started in person on March 1st, 2020, and we very soon had to
Yeah.
go to Zoom. Um, and it's great because now we have parents from like all over the country. We've even had some parents from different countries come and
Mm,
um, join our sessions, join our classes, which is, just a wonderful reminder that this is sort of across the world. Parents are struggling with kids who, are coming into the world, a little differently, and moving through the world a little differently. Um, and so we've seen, it's just amazing to see some of the parents shift right across the course of the 8 weeks, when we're in that class. It's just We also offer one-to-one coaching. Some people like don't necessarily feel comfortable in a group, or there's other, there's other options for parents that want a different format to get the support. But it's, I'm in the trenches. Like, I am living this every day. And so I've seen how some of the shifts that I've made over the years based on all the stuff that we're reading, like we spend a lot of time reading about what is neuroscience telling us, what are people writing about this right now? What's current in terms of how people are thinking about the best ways to support kids, and it's been like a really amazing shift to see the way things have changed in my house, when I've shifted. I mean, it's, as I always joke, it's like we're like 2 steps forward, 1 step backwards. Now we're going sideways. Sometimes we go diagonally. Like, nothing's really linear when you're raising a differently, a kid whose brains are just wired differently than their peers. But it's
Right.
but
Yeah,
it's
absolutely.
all good.
So this is fantastic, right? So you're able to help shift the mindset of the parents, right? Because I know, like, from the trenches, right? That's where I come from as well. Been in some very difficult trenches. Now, I love the trench that I'm in, working with the kids. So, you know, worked with a lot of really challenging behaviors and families, in the home, in the school, out in the community, every now and again. But, you learn a lot working with all these different kids and different challenges. They all have something different going on, but if you're able to change what you're doing as the adult, right? As the one who's the leader, right? You're trying to guide the kids to help them out. You're leading, you want to set a good example. You want to help the kids accomplish whatever kind of goals they have. It's a million times easier for you to change your behavior than to just magically change the kids' behavior. Right.
Well, so yes. And then here's the secret that we tell parents. And like, I think it's class 3 when we go over the ABCs of behavior, like the A being kind of what happens before your antecedent, the B being the behavior, the C being the consequence, what happens after the behavior. Like, the B is the one thing that you 100% have no control over as the parent.
Right.
You completely cannot control the behavior. And so we bang our heads against the wall trying to control our kids' behavior. You can control what happens sometimes a little bit beforehand, and you can often control what happens after sometimes, and so there's elements that we can control those pieces. But I think getting parents to understand kind of that the behavior is like the one thing that is 100% in that like purview of the child, and that is their thing that they can own, and that they do own. So, the other thing that we spend a lot of time explaining to parents is just kind of breaking down what is behavior, right? And it's obviously, we know that behavior is just a mode of communication, right? It's a way of telling us something that's going on for a child. And I think if we can shift from, and then so we have a lot of mantras that we like to give parents, so that we joke that they should like tattoo them on their forearms so that they can easily access them. But one of them that we really love is like, my child isn't giving me a hard time. My child is having a hard time. And so simple, really, like, there's sometimes a little tiny shift in language can really radically change the way you approach a situation, right? Like, think about the energy you're bringing to like my kid has given me a hard time, right? You're like annoyed, you're frustrated. Like, this is not going to be the way to sort of like help your kid learn and grow. And you're going to feel really irritated the whole time. But if you get to the place where my kid is having a hard time, then we can look at, okay, what are some solutions to help my child have an easier time? What are the things that need to happen? And what can we do in advance when these are like predictable times when my child has a hard time?
Yeah, because it's a pattern, right? So that's great. So now, like, my kid is having a hard time and we've got a sticking point here, right? So then you're able to see these behavior patterns, right? Because if it was a one-time problem, that's not really a problem, right? That's gone, right? It's already happened, right? But now my kid is having a hard time, like, they're a picky eater. My kid is having a hard time getting ready in the morning with the morning routine. My kid is having a hard time. They won't get off the couch or stop playing video games, right? It's a pattern, right? So you're able to look at the behavior, okay, which is what it's not in your control, right? But you're able to handle the situation differently, right? Either before this behavior happens, So you can change the circumstances. Okay. So maybe you can change the behavior ahead of time. You offer a choice, or you make something a little bit easier, like giving them a schedule or something like that kind of helps them get on track, before there's a problem. Then you've got the behavior, right? And then how do you react when that behavior does happen? Let's say it is a challenging behavior, right? It doesn't always have to be. This applies to the great behaviors, things you want to see. It's all the same kind of pattern, right? We have habits, but then you're able to change the consequences, right? Whether it's good or bad or anything like that, how do you react to the situation? That is something that's in your control. And that's going to help you help your kids, right?
Yeah.
Help them get unstuck.
Yeah. And even just a slight shift in the language there is that I think, when we think about reaction, we often assume that a reaction is just like what we just do unconsciously.
Yeah.
But so shifting from that feeling of reactivity to like response, like how can I respond versus then just
Mm-hmm.
act like a gut, reaction to something. And so like that conscious response to a situation. And I think, we also talked to parents a little bit about this idea that consequences aren't necessarily something that like is like a thing that I've planned to do. Like consequences just literally what happened after the behavior happened. Right. And so if we
Yeah.
think about that, right? Like, so if a child, gets really angry and yells, and then another parent like turns around and was like, hey, stop doing that. Like now the child's kind of getting that connection with the parent that they wanted, even though they did it through a way that's yelling. Like, so sometimes like those consequences happen very unconsciously. Right. And so we think about, there's ways that we like consequate, right, a
Mm-hmm.
behavior or something, right? So we want to try so that behavior doesn't happen again. Um, but that sometimes those things, to kind of understand that broader picture of
Yeah.
bigger picture of what does it mean? What is an actual consequence to
Right. No, that's a great point. You want to be responding, right, with something more purposeful and thoughtful, right? Not just reacting, right? Because then sometimes what happens, which this happens all the time, the kid ends up triggering you, right?
Mhm.
So you flip your lid, you've lost your patience, like you're getting frustrated, as opposed to just, staying calm and cool, collected, and responding accordingly. And then if you have a strategy, you'll know, you know, do I want to see more of this? Do I want to see less of this? How should I react? Should I be like, wow, oh, I love how you just use your words this time to ask for whatever you wanted. Instead, that's amazing. Thank you so much for asking nicely. Here you go. And
Mhm.
now your kid doesn't need to do what was the possible alternative? Maybe they would have had like a meltdown because they want, access to the iPad or some, treat or some, something like
Yeah.
that, right?
Yeah. I mean, I think the other thing that is just so important to understand is sort of this big basic idea, right? That like kids, this is the Ross Green thing that is, we have a couple of like North Stars who kind of guide a lot of what we share with parents is that, that Ross Green idea that from the explosive child, that kids do well when they can, right? And so if
Mm,
they're not doing well, then there's something getting in the way. Then they either are lacking the skills to do better or they're lacking the support. Um, some way of support, or for whatever that could look like to do better. So if your child has a sensory challenge, right? A siren comes
yeah.
by, you can't control the siren, but that loud sound is triggering, right, for your
Yeah.
child. And that is not something they are able to like control in their brain at this point, right? Like our prefrontal lobe. So this is your brain. It's like your prefrontal lobe is that top front part of your brain, right? That covers, sometimes it's referred to as Tina Payne Bryson and Daniel Siegel refer to that as your upstairs brain,
Yeah.
versus your downstairs brain, which is kind of your more like reactive brain, right? Your lizard brain, your amygdala, which is the part of the brain that just reacts without any kind of conscious choice making whatsoever. And it's the part of the brain that also sort of has our autonomic systems
Yeah.
in place. But those prefrontal cortexes, which is like the thinking brain and our rational brain and the thing that helps us get from point A to point B to point C, it's like where all of our executive functioning system lives. that is not fully developed in typically developing kids until age
Right.
25, right? And
Yeah.
so for neurodivergent kids, it's like typically about up to a third later, right? So they're like going to be 30 plus by the time their prefrontal cortexes are, more fully formed and
Yeah.
really able to rationalize and to control what's happening in the downstairs brain, right? And so if your upstairs brain is fully online, you're able to notice, right? Oh, I am really reactive right now. I'm going to just tone that down. And that's why we as the adults, as you were saying, are the ones that it's hard, but it is our job to try to stay calm in the moment. I think it's like Gabrielle and I always say, it's like 90% of your challenges is will be reduced by just staying calm.
Yeah.
And even if that means your kid's still having the meltdown, as long as you're staying calm, more likely the meltdown will be shorter, right?
Oh
And
yeah.
you're not freaking out, right? And you're able to show up and be the right, the best parent that you can be in that moment when your brain's not offline. And one of the things you were talking about, that idea of like, when our kids start to flip their lids and, start getting really angry and kind of lose it. It's like our brains are wired to do the same, right? Like those
Mm.
mirror neurons kind of just want to respond to exactly what's happening in front of us. And evolutionarily, like, makes sense, right? Like, Joey over here is freaking out because there's a lion about to attack us. Like, I need to also freak out too, because I need to, like, my adrenaline needs to go because we're about to be attacked. But,
Right.
but it's different when we don't really need to always have that feeling. So kind of being able to understand, have our prefrontal cortexes can override some of that stuff.
Right. Right. Yeah. We all have these natural survival mechanisms, where you end up sensing, you almost feel like there's a threat or some sort of danger, where you're kind of feeling unsafe or stressed out, right? Nowadays, right? We all have stress, and that serves a function, right? It drives us so we could survive, so you end up getting your fight or flight system activated, but it's not always appropriate, so if you can stay calm and cool, right? I think of like zooming out, like you said, like the ABCs, right? So zoom out here, see what's going on, and which behavior do you really want to look at? That's the other thing, because the behavior could be anything, right? You could be looking at your behavior, could be looking at his behavior. And if you zoom out, you can get a better sense of what's going on and how to react, right? Or respond. I like how you kind of made that adjustment, right? So if you're reacting, it's more of you get triggered, you have like a knee-jerk reaction. It's a good way to put it. But if you're able to take a breath, like literally, this kid has just lost it. They're breaking pencils, they're throwing things off the desk or whatever. They're just having some sort of meltdown. That's a common issue. But now slow it down. Okay. Why is this happening? All right. And so if it's already happened, that's the thing. You can't undo it. Right. You can't rewind time. So you freaking out or reacting is not going to help.
No.
So you got to play it cool and be the adult. So now you think, what is going on? Like, what would be, reinforcing these behaviors? Because also, if this is a pattern, if your kid is prone to having like certain meltdowns, it could be a sensory issue or it could be a communication issue. They're not sure how to ask for what they want. So, what would your job be, right? If it's already happened, you got to play it cool. You don't want to feed the fire, right? You don't want to provide reinforcement. Like, oh, this kid had a meltdown, I better give him the iPad just like he was asking for. Like,
I mean, the
no.
other thing too is that we also say there's also these like chains of behaviors.
Yeah.
It's like a behavior chain, right? So something happens, like, like your child's at the park, someone brushes by him and taps him by accident as they're walking by, like a kid just wasn't paying attention. And your child is like sensory, sort of very sensory sensitive and very, sensory averse. And they start to get really angry, right? Because like they're flipping out. And now you're consequating and you're looking at like, why are you screaming? And now you're like yelling at the, and you're trying to mitigate the screaming, which is like really, just like the original behavior that happened, like, okay, this is predictable. And then, so we need to step back and circle back. And at a time when everyone's calm, then we work on, hey,
right.
let's come up with a strategy. Because sometimes if someone brushes by you in the park, that feels terrible. What are some good things that we can do? And know that like your child is not always, or it's going to take a long time for them to be able to even like access those strategies. Because again, that takes your prefrontal cortex kind of
Right.
overriding. But bringing their awareness, it's a slow shift. But one of
Mm-hmm.
the things that what you were talking about made me think about is the incredible role that we also talk a lot about in our classes of incredible importance of co-regulation. That when you can help a child who's struggling, come back down into a place of calm, right? And you can do that, when you think of Stuart Shanker, wrote a book I loved called Self-Reg, it's very like neuro wonky, like it has
Mm-hmm.
a lot of like technical stuff, which I, like it or not, it was a very helpful book. He talked a lot about this idea of, big behaviors, those challenging behaviors are stress responses. And if we can think about them as stress responses, and we're like, okay, what can we do to mitigate that stress and to help reduce that stress? And one
Right.
of the things that reduces the stress, as he said, was oxytocin. And oxytocin in the body, it's like a hormone that just like makes us feel connected
Mm.
to other people. It's calming, it's soothing. And so, the number one way to get to oxytocin is by human touch, right? Touching, hugging. But if you have a child that's not, that's going to push them over the edge because they're sensory averse and they don't want to be touched, then you can do other things like a soothing voice and all kinds
Mm-hmm.
of other strategies. It could even be like a pet coming to like, like help you, and stroking a pet's fur or something could be, or like a soft blanket or soft music or something, that's going to help bring that
Yep.
oxytocin up, is what will help reduce the stress and kind of reduce the behavior.
Exactly.
The
Yeah.
idea too, I think that parents get stuck a lot is when we think about co-regulation. So when my son is having a meltdown, I'll say to him like, hey, bud, I see that you're really having a hard time right now. Like, how can I help you? What do you need? Do you want a
Mm.
hug right now? Will that help?
So
Um,
like acknowledgement.
yeah. And so that validation, right? I see you and I see that you're struggling. And
Right.
I'm here to help you. And if you just want me to stay next to you, okay, that's cool too. Like you just let me know what's going to help you right now in this moment. And usually just that is enough to bring it down at least like, half a notch. For him, some kids, he's 11, right? So he's more self-aware than like a 5-year-old would be. And more able to, sort of have those strategies that he can access. But I think parents get stuck sometimes on thinking that like, oh, if I'm always helping him calm down, he's never going to learn how to calm down by himself. But actually, the brain science is fascinating because it shows the exact opposite of that. That if you leave them alone and don't help them, then they don't learn how to do it. Right. And
Yeah.
so you coming in there to help, that co-regulation actually teaches them to learn how to self-regulate. So that was really illuminating for me when I learned that.
Yeah, that is huge. Yeah, the co-regulation is huge, so you're able to help them calm back down, regain, their mind basically.
Mhm.
Because once they kind of lose it, that's the thing. It's over. If your kid kind of flips their lid, don't try to teach them all the
No,
great strategies that
no.
at this time. You're like, it would be really cool if you tried to. No, you got to wait and help the situation calm down. Right.
Mhm.
So when they're gone, they're gone. Okay. So the
Yeah,
learning window is closed. Okay.
right.
If your kid's having a meltdown. So that's one of the common problems, right? People, teachers, parents, whatever, they're trying to coach or teach the kids something when they're not ready to listen, So you
No,
want
it's
to
like, yeah.
calm it down and they're listening and reacting, like how I think of it also, we have, the environment is a big factor. And in a certain sense, your relationships to other people, like your parents, in a sense, is part of their environment,
Mhm.
right? You're there, you're presenting a calm presence.
Mhm.
You're using your voice and bringing it down, and it's okay. We're going to like let the waters settle a little bit. And I'm here for you. Do you need a hug? You need me to listen to you? And also like the tone, like literally for your inner ear, helps you sense safety. right? Because the other kids, they're feeling stressed out and triggered. It comes from a sort of, they're feeling almost threatened, they're frustrated and discombobulated, put it that way. But if you kind of help them co-regulate, help them calm down, then they regain their mind and you can take it from there. You can recover, right? Because that's the other thing. So you don't want to teach when it's not the right time, if the kid's not going to be able to listen to you, right?
No, it's always counterproductive. I mean,
Yeah.
it's so productive if you're trying to explain something to them. The other thing that we almost always tell parents is that in general, use less words. Like for the words, the better, kind of across the board, always better. You can do a lot with the gesture, or like like I could just point to my son's feet instead of saying like, go get your shoes on, go get your shoes on, go get your shoes on. Right.
Yeah.
And the visual cues actually for a lot of our kids who struggle, who are neurodivergent, have executive functioning challenges. I'd say like most of them do, right?
Yep.
Any kid with ADHD, any autistic child. And so for those kids who struggle with executive functioning lives in the place of our brain that's visual. And so that's why we can ask our kids over and over again to get their shoes on. And they're just like, they're not seeing it because they're not paying attention. They're not there. And so sometimes just shifting to something that's visual, like, pick up the shoe. I started to do this with my older son with like getting out of the house was, one of those typical things, right? It's like making me completely, it would like ruin my day every day because it was so hard. And I'd get home, I'd be like have to like breathe into a paper bag for 10 minutes. But I started to just point, I went to this amazing workshop on executive functioning and I learned about this visual thing. And so I shifted and I just put my hand on his shoulder and I just pointed at his feet. And I was like, what do you need? Really calmly.
Oh.
And he was like, look down. And he was like, oh, I got to get my shoes on. I'm like, it was like, oddly, I'm not going to promise that like this is going to happen for everyone, but like it was miraculous for our family. And so those visual cues are great. And sometimes language is just irritating and jarring for kids. And especially if we're kind of barking orders at them over and over again, it feels bad. I mean, it feels bad for us when people are barking orders at us, like kids are no different. So I think, we can kind of tap into a visual cue and less language, always better.
Yeah, exactly. So this gets us more into the antecedent area, which is what I want to touch on, right? So consequences, your kids already had some sort of problem, right? You're going to respond appropriately. You're going to try to calm the situation down. If you like what they're doing, maybe your kid just did a great job. You want to provide some sort of reward, right? So that's like a social praise or a tangible reward or a token of some kind. You want to make them feel rewarded and also be consistent. That's the other thing I want to quickly touch on when it comes to the consequences and how you respond to your kids. The consistency is king, right? If you want your kids to learn, the consequences need to be consistent, right? That's one of the other major pitfalls I think parents and teachers fall into. They try something one time, it worked, it didn't work. There's sort of some of the times they're providing this reward, but some of the times they don't. And so you don't get the results that you're looking for because it's not consistent enough, right? But that's after the fact. Okay. So whether your kid just, wow, they got home and they took their homework out and they did it right away. Amazing. Right? That could be the behavior. What's the consequence? Do you get some extra screen time? You get some extra whatever. We have time. I'll take you out somewhere. Like, I love how you just got home and got things done. I want to see more of that, dude. That was awesome. High five.
Yeah. And then you can also in that same way be like, hey, how did that feel? Like that felt good to you.
Yeah.
Right?
So intrinsic.
We're trying to build the intrinsic reward system. And for a lot of our neurodivergent kids, that is less accessible than it is for neurotypical kids. So that intrinsic piece is really good to just like really draw out for them in a overt way.
So like, did you notice that feeling, how good that felt? Or did you, you feel like when I have kids and they're training, so they're working on movements and, building strength. So it's like, wow, right. Did you notice how much, smoother that was. You feel how much stronger you're getting. Look at how you're able to do this, right? So it's like a feeling of accomplishment, a feeling like you're gaining skills, right? So this will bring it back full circle, because what we're doing, you got to teach these kids certain skills. You're their teacher, you're their parent. So that could be their coping skills. That could be, fitness skills, movements and lifts, and, other just habits like reading is a skill, communication is a skill. You want to help your kids get these skills. So that's why if they've already had a meltdown, this is not the time to teach them skills.
No,
Right.
they're
So
totally inaccessible.
yeah,
Like their brains are
inaccessible.
offline. Like
Yeah.
when our heads are
That,
flipped, we are in our lizard brain. Like we're
yeah.
in like it, even though like we always joke that like, I know I just offered my child a blue cup instead of the red cup that they normally had. And why do they feel like they're being attacked by a lion? They just do, right?
Yeah.
If they're in meltdown, you can't be like, it's not a big deal. Just have it. Like, no, that's not the time. You just say like, I know you really wanted that red cup. So I like when you can do that, like when you can see what a kid wants and you can just be like, I got you, right? Like I see you, I see what you want. I see that I'm validating what's going on for you. That
Yeah.
will almost always, take things down.
Yes, exactly. Kids need, we all need attention. Kids need a lot of attention. Exactly. So, it's painful to be ignored, or they feel like you're not getting it. Like you don't understand what the problem really is, because you just want me to get over it or ignore it or move on or whatever. But yeah, a little bit of acknowledgement goes such a long way, like, wow, I see how frustrating it is, when the routine is broken, like, oh, so-and-so, we always go to this store or something. It's closed today. Sorry, I didn't, couldn't have predicted that. There's always something, like a break in the routine is another big issue. So that's handling the situation after the fact, right? You want to be calm. You want to know what you're doing to respond to it. And if it's a pattern, you can also come up with a kind of plan, right? Like a behavior plan, where it's like, don't be so surprised, like, oh my God, my kid's having a meltdown. I'm not sure what to do. It's like, if your kid has this as an issue, like, okay, well, let's look at the patterns. So you make a plan, and then how you want to respond. You can start predicting what's going to happen to a certain extent, probabilistically.
Yeah.
Okay, this kid's going to have an issue with this. This kid's not. He's calm. He's cool, but now you realize, how do I react? Like, this kid's having a meltdown. Is it because he needs attention? Is it because he doesn't do well just left on his own? Okay. Or is it because they just want something tangible? They want some goodie. They want the iPad. They want more dessert. They want access to some place, or is it something else like sensory related? So you want to look at what's going on, get like a plan, and now you can kind of, develop the plan, work from it. So you're not stuck and lost. Like, it's not fun as a parent or a teacher. You feel like, oh my God, like you're in the moment, like, I don't know what to do. Or now there's another problem. I don't know what to do all over again. Or I'm not, you're so unsure of the situation. It's difficult for you as a parent, but now you start to see the patterns, right? So wait a minute, I've got a plan. And now we're going to work on this so we can sort of baby step our way out of here, right? Because maybe it's a communication issue. Maybe your kid is having a meltdown because they want the iPad, but instead you could teach them how to ask for it in a more appropriate way. So this gets into the skill acquisition or teaching skills to the kids. So you mentioned executive functioning.
Yeah,
well, go ahead.
I was just going to say that similarly, I think, that I think we can think about, like if it's so much of this, honestly, like with kids they're so uncomfortable being uncomfortable. And so are adults, right?
Yeah.
And that's okay. That's natural. And so I think when we can, one, just start to like build in small, we can teach them a little bit about like, sometimes we have to wait in line and it's really boring. Like, this is a place where we have to be a little uncomfortable. We can find things to do while we're waiting online, right? Like, We could, talk about a fun thing. We can think about something we love to think about. And so
Mhm.
those, in those calm moments, like find the things that during those uncomfortable moments. And so if the child's like, I, the iPad right now, like, why can't I, you could say, I know you really want the iPad. You can also still hold the boundary, but
Yes.
just say like, I know you really want it. It is hard. It is really hard to not
Yeah.
get what you want right now. I know, bud. It happens to me too. I totally get it. And then you're just in there with them and we're on the same team
Right.
and you just still can't get it. Sorry,
Yeah.
buddy,
Yeah.
your time's up. Um, and then for some kids, like it's a longer explanation if they need, but I think just that like connection with them, and I think a lot of times, the other like language shift that I think is an important one that we, try to convey to parents. Cause I think so the behavioral approach kind of will think of like some behaviors as attention seeking, right?
Mhm.
And I like to shift it to connection seeking, right? And that's a
Mm.
subtle change in language, but I think it conveys something very different, right? Because I think our perception generally of attention can have a negative spin to it, right? Like, oh, they just want attention. Like, why can't they just let me
Mhm.
like, you know, be cooking without like tugging at my skirt all the time, right? Or something, tugging at me and trying to get me to pay attention to them. And that is a child that is feeling disconnected, right? And so if we can think about that and you're like, oh, okay, this child needs more time to be connected to me, right? So I noticed this with my older son, the stuff in the morning also, when that was, you know, I didn't even think of it as necessarily attention seeking, but I was like, I'm going to take a little bit of time in the morning to just like we called it like a morning snuggle. And we just do like a morning snuggle every morning. And it was like things just went better because he was just feeling a
Yeah.
little more connected to me. And then I could be like, hey, you got to get your shoes. We got to go, and so then it felt a little bit better. So I
Right.
think tone is really important. Connection is really important, kind of shifting the lens to like our kids are not just like miniature adults, right? Like their brains are very, very underdeveloped, right?
Right.
Way less developed than ours. And so I think when we can always give our kids a little bit of grace and a little bit of the benefit of the doubt, that can go a long way in shifting kind of the way that they move through the world, right? Like, I know you want this thing. I totally get it. It's hard, bud.
Yeah.
And then you can teach into a problem solving, right? So then I'm going to build some skills with you on like, how do you solve a problem? How do you, when you can't get something you want, what else could you do? Like, let's build our skills
Mhm.
for finding other things to do, right? And so then we're
Yeah.
like, what else are some other cool things that we could be doing right now? Here's
Mm.
some stuff I like to do when I'm, trying to not, when I know I can't use my phone right now because it's been too much. I need a break. My eyes are hurting. I can't be on on the screen. And so I'll, maybe model it or maybe ask, maybe give some suggestions. Or maybe they have some ideas on their own. We actually have a list. So I keep a list with pictures like on our fridge of like
Yeah.
non-screen stuff Max likes to do. And we actually have, Max is my younger son. And we also have two columns, and like one column is stuff that Max can do with someone and stuff that Max can do on his own, right? Because sometimes some of these non-screen things are going to require, a parent being in there. So
Sure.
kind of giving them those problem solving tools. And that again is that's antecedent stuff, right? And so whatever you can, the other thing that I was going to say that you were making me think a little bit about was that idea of like when we're seeing the patterns, half the stuff that feels like, oh, this was like, I didn't expect this to happen at all. And
Right.
most stuff, when you really step back, falls into like buckets, right? Like most of the kids' behaviors are reactions in ways that like are very predictable when you step back and look at them.
Yeah.
So the other thing that we always coach parents to become are detectives, right? So your job is to become a detective and understand your child a little bit better, right? And like
Mm.
again, like what makes them tick, what do they hate, what do they tolerate because they're just being nice to you, what are they like meh about, what are the things that, like, are they, what's their temperament? Like understanding these big ideas about your child. Like we had one parent in our Facebook group. We have a Raising Orchid Kids Facebook group, and that's just free if anyone wants to join. You have to answer some membership questions, which
Mhm.
people sometimes forget to do. And I'm like, just agree to abide by the rules. That someone had said, that like, one of the problems they had was that they signed up for a whole year of soccer and their kid like never played a single game. Right.
Yeah.
It's like a common one. Right. And so I was like, oh, okay. So tell me about a little bit more about this. What happened? Like, did they just really want to do it? And then all of a sudden, like they changed their mind and, or did you just sign them up? And, like what happened beforehand? What was the
Hmm.
thing? And so the child was amenable to playing in a soccer team, right? Liked soccer. It was a 6-year-old. But they got to the game and it was like very overwhelming. There was a lot of people on the sides. It felt a lot of pressure. And they were like, I am not playing. This is not, and they were very uncomfortable. So like, okay, let's just watch this time. And so the parent did a great job of scaffolding,
Hmm.
okay, that's right. And so that child's temperament, it was like, okay, so now you've learned something about your child. Like they are not like they need to step back and get a sense of what's happening. They also might get overwhelmed at this point in their life by like other parents around. So they might need like a less, high stakes kind of thing. Like, so there's all this stuff that you can learn from like an experience like that. Right. And so,
Yeah.
so those are good things to kind of think about, like how, what is your child like and how do they move through the world in a way that keeps them the most regulated?
Right. Yeah. That's fantastic. That's a great example because, you're at the soccer field. So you want your kid to get engaged and, but you can't force it all at once. Right. So what is your kid actually ready to do? And maybe you can baby step it and
Mm-hmm.
get there eventually. Right. So they're learning these new skills, like one thing at a time, like the scaffolding you mentioned. So you learn a little bit, build new scaffolding, then you can build on top of that next time, right? You don't need to like overwhelm your kids. You're teaching them skills, but it's not all going to happen in one day, right? You got to
Right. And the whole,
slowly build
yeah.
them up so they have these skills. So like waiting, for example, you brought up another great situation. Waiting, you don't think of it, but waiting is a skill. In a way, waiting can be taught, and it's hard now. It's harder than ever, I think, because we're so used to having our phones, so
Mm-hmm.
used to being fully, kind of distracted at any point in time. You have access to something like now. It's hard to wait, but that's a skill that you can kind of build up with your kids, right? And that helps avoid these challenging behaviors,
Mm-hmm.
so you're able to sort of make a list with them, come up with some ideas. What could we do? So now we're sort of working together here, like, oh, you want to watch a certain movie? Well, we can't do that right now, but why don't we come up with a list of movies that we would like to
Mm-hmm.
watch in the future? Oh, that's so cool. I never heard of that. Who's that actor? Who do you like? Has he been in any other movies that you like? Who's your
Mm-hmm.
favorite character? Right. So you're engaging them, and you're able to help build those skills before they have some sort of meltdown.
Yeah.
That's the thing, right? So we talked about when the window is closed, your kid's having a tantrum, they're stressed
Mm-hmm.
out, you got to wait for them to come back. But now what you're doing is you're coming in there ahead of time to build those skills. You mentioned executive functioning. Okay. So as we sort of start to wrap up here, I want to point out that's what we're really trying to do is help the kids make their own choices,
Mm-hmm.
right? Help the kids get things done. And so you build a schedule for them that will help them stay organized, right? So they could see it. They could see in the morning, I do this, then I brush my teeth, put my shoes on, go get breakfast, grab my backpack, go to school. You have a routine, right? Or maybe you're giving them some choices, right? Okay, do you want to do your homework here? Do you want to, pen or pencil, red crayon, green crayon? You
Mm-hmm.
decide, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so you're able to help them make their own choices. So you're not just like controlling them so much, but
Mm-hmm.
you're helping them navigate their own way through the world, right? So you're
I
just
mean,
giving them
yeah.
signs and pointers, encouragement. Oh, you're headed in the right direction. Now, you mentioned a leading question earlier, right? So it's like, I could point these gestures, right? So instead of repeating myself like power struggles, get your shoes on, get your shoes on, get your shoe. Why can't you put your shoes on? We got to go. We're running late. Like, what is wrong with you? Don't you
Mm-hmm.
know we're running late? Do you want to be late? Now we're going to,
Mm-hmm.
no. So instead I could just, I put the shoes out. You can see them. I point to them. What do you think? What do you think you should do right now? point to the shoes. So they start thinking for themselves. You don't have to just always tell them exactly what to do. That helps in the beginning if they're really not sure. Sometimes you got to do like hand over hand and walk them through it. And then eventually it's like you got to fade back your instruction as a parent, as a teacher, right? So then it's like brush your teeth, like, okay, go in there. Now you have less of a power struggle, right? You have less, you're not repeating yourself, you're not yelling. They know what to do, or they need a reminder. Maybe they get distracted. Some kids are very spacey, you know, and they're in their mind. They've got a million thoughts running through their mind and they're distracted. So then you point out or like, and it's subtle and you're using fewer words, like you said, but now that means they're doing more in their own head, right? So they're like, oh, right. I'm supposed to do that thing. And so they're taking more initiative, right? That's how I like to think of it.
Yeah. I mean, I think all kids want to feel competent, right? And they
Yes.
want to be able to, and so tapping into that, you know, like that's why kids love to like do the things the adults are doing, right? And so whenever you can give them that space to signal that like you're competent, I know you're competent. If I'm putting my kids' shoes on, that is kind of signaling that they're not competent. I mean, if they're two, they don't know how to put their shoes on,
Yeah.
but you can begin to teach them little parts of it. Like, okay, I got your shoe on. Can you pull the Velcro part? You know, you pull this part, you know, so that there's little ways, again, that's scaffolding of getting them towards that feeling of kids need to be autonomous, right? That's what, you know, they want, we want them to be autonomous, right? And the other piece too, is that we also want them to be able to advocate for themselves, right? And so that's the other piece where you can help them kind of build up the cognition, the what we call metacognition, understanding your own brain, right? And so we use a lot of like, try to coach parents a lot to use the your brain language. So like your brain really gets upset when someone offers you something you don't want, right? Like, or
Right.
your brain really loves it when, you know, when it's quiet, right? Something like that. So the kids begin to understand what helps their brain stay regulated. And I think also when we use the brain stuff, it feels less like a value judgment on like my whole being.
Yeah. It's less personal. I was just going to
Yeah.
say that, right? You want
Yeah.
to depersonalize this. Like, it's okay. It's just, you know, this is how you feel. Like you have a certain fear of, you know, whatever, public speaking or elevators or dogs or whatever. It's okay. That's like your brain is having a reaction.
Right.
Right.
And then you get to the point where you want to teach them like, okay, so this is hard for your brain. So what do you need right now? And this is what you need to be able to share, right? In school, in life, like, you know, as you move through life, like you want to be able to say, like, this is what I need to stay to feel better in this situation. And sometimes be hard for me.
Right. So then, yeah, it's great. So you're pointing it out. Then they notice like, oh, okay, maybe I feel I'm starting to get frustrated, right? But I haven't lost my cool just yet, but I could feel that. So then you notice like, wow, I notice like, okay, you're getting agitated. See what's going on here. So now you get the kids to notice this feeling, like we said earlier. What could we do? Right. So now's the time where we have a moment, we have an opportunity before things go like off the deep end here. Oh, maybe I could ask for a break. That's a skill, right?
Yeah.
That's the thing. So you're teaching these kids skills. So you're helping the parents teach their kids, right? That's what Raising Orchid Kids is doing.
Yes.
So you're helping them teach their kids how to cope, how to communicate, how to wait patiently, whatever it is, how to get things done, you know. That's the thing. We're trying to teach these kids the skills. So I'm really excited about your program because, you know, you're working directly with the parents, right? So me as a teacher, in a way, like I can only work with so many kids in a certain day, you know, especially for any one kid out there, but they're spending so much time with mom and dad. That's really going to be the number one natural teacher, right? So we all got to be on the same page. So I think it's great. You're helping empower other parents to be their best teacher for their kid.
Yeah. And I think, you know, it's, you know, and parenting in general is very hard, very, very hard. No one tells you quite exactly how hard it is. But parenting a neurodivergent kid is like exponentially harder. And, you know, it varies for everyone. And so I think that, you know, for a lot of parents, just like finding the community and also working on taking care of ourselves as parents is incredibly important. and finding that space to just like, if I need to show up and be the best parent I'm going to be, I need to have my prefrontal cortex fully online, right? And so what do I need to do that? And so that's kind of a big piece too, of like thinking
Mm-hmm.
about the things that I need to advocate for my own brain too, right? And so, so one of the things that I started doing, with my son starts yelling about, I just cover my ears like this, because I'm like, it hurts
Yep.
my ears when you yell, bud. And that hurts my ears. And I'm just
That's
taking care of
great.
myself, and I'm modeling that, and I'm yelling at him less because like for yelling, I'm not yelling for yelling. I'm just kind of taking care of myself. But I think, that whenever we can, connecting with other people, finding community is just so incredibly comforting and important. And I mean, like, it's just been really fantastic to see parents evolve. Um, through the community that we've built, but also, through the classes and kind of learning a little bit more and shifting their perspectives. I mean, we joke that like we've probably saved a few marriages in there
Yeah.
because it's really stressful and getting on the same page, because a lot of times we'll have both parents come, which is always kind of the ideal. Really, really helps. So
Yeah. No, that's big. So, I want to talk more about, just what you guys offer and how people can get in touch with you. So, 'cause you don't want to be doing it alone. You don't have to, right? There are a lot of families out there. A lot of people are going through these power struggles and stressful situations, just like you are, for anyone who's listening at home. So, I know you offer it's 8-week parenting course, right?
yeah, so the way that we do it, we offer it 3 to 4 times a year, usually seasonally. Sometimes we take off the summer to do other stuff,
Sure.
but other times of year we offer, like we have one coming up. Our next session is in January. And we alternate between daytime and evening sessions, to just, sort of because people can't make, can't make all the different times work. So and we do 8-week classes. So our last session was an evening session, 8:30 to 9:30 p.m. Eastern time. This next one is going to be a daytime session that we start in January, 12 to 1 p.m. on Thursdays. We record all the classes, so they're posted, and we have a private part of our website that's for, has all the stuff for each of the weeks, all the documents and all the, handouts if you want them,
Mm.
and worksheets if you want them. And we move through the class, and we teach parents, and we help them. We give them a lot of individualized support, because it's we keep our classes small. They're usually around 12. So
Mm-hmm.
between 10 and 14 is typically the size, which gives us the space to really be able to help parents individually. We also have, typically parents of 3 to 12-year-olds, but we have space on either end. If you have a 2-year-old or a 14-year-old, like fine.
Yeah.
That's also okay. And then we offer, once people have come through our classes, we offer them the 8-week class. We offer, if people want to continue to get support and they feel like they kind of want some more ongoing support, we have a membership program, where we have like 2 support group meetings basically a month. We call them Q&A sessions. We also offer webinars that we teach, and the webinars are free for our members and they're cost to non-members, like the IP workshop I talked about. But we do one on
Right.
executive functioning. We do, one on siblings. We've got all kinds of, sort of specific topics. And we also do one-to-one coaching, if parents want more individualized kind of one-to-one support, we offer that. And we also have like a great network if people like are looking for, school placement specialists, I'll
Yeah.
direct them in the right
Yeah.
direction,
There's all sorts of other related little
Yeah.
services and tasks, where you need an expert opinion, like school choice. That's a big one.
Mm-hmm. And so we also have a Facebook group that's free for anyone. So if anyone here is on Facebook and you want to just join us, please do. We share wins every week. We share challenges. We share resources. And it's a really lovely online community. So, and it's private. So it's a private Facebook group. Um,
Fantastic.
yeah.
Yeah. So I cannot recommend this enough for parents out there. If you think you may be, raising an orchid kid and you want some help, something very practical. So this way you can learn the principles, right? Teaching your kids these skills, how you handle, certain behavior patterns, how you're going to be responding, reacting, and working together as a family. So you want to be, you got to learn these skills as a parent and how to teach them, to your kid. And then also you can talk with Jen and Gabrielle about, your specific situation, right? If you have some particular scenario, I'm sure you want to work through, you want to get advice about, my particular kid, he's like this, we're like that, we're in this situation. You can work through these things, and then, you'll see how these principles apply across the board, right?
Yeah.
Like teaching skills, executive functioning, staying calm, and, having the right kind of consequence and being consistent. These things over time, make your life a lot easier when you start to see these patterns and you start applying it, right? Because it's not just about learning it like in a book, but you got to be doing it, in real life with your kids, making your life easier.
Yeah.
So thank you so much, Jen. Is there anything else you want to add?
I just want to say also, if our website is pretty straightforward. It's just raisingorchidkids.com. So you can find us there or email us at raisingorchidkids@gmail.com. So
fantastic. Yeah. Raisingorchidkids.com. And I believe you can get a free checklist as well to see if you are raising an orchid kid, right?
Yes, we have a checklist that, sort of is helpful for looking at, and this is not like any medical diagnosis of any sort, but it's just sort of a general sense of like, oh, would these supports apply to our family?
Absolutely. Okay. So tons of helpful resources. Go check it out, raisingorchidkids.com. And thanks again for joining us today, Jen.
Great to be here.
Thank you.